Aloha mai kākou. I am Kawaikapuokalani Hewett, and we are here at Windward Community College, here at the Palikū Theatre. First and foremost, I would like to focus on mahalo, our appreciation for the administration and staff here at the Windward Community College, and everyone involved at the Palikū Theatre making this presentation, Ke Ao o Ka Mālamalama o Ka Hula, possible. Ke Ao o Ka Mālamalama o Ka Hula, the Enlightenment of Hula and Hula traditions. Welcome. Ke aloha nui, ke aloha nui, ke aloha nui ya kākou. We are here to discuss hula, hula history, the mo'olelo of hula, hula traditions, loina hula, hula genealogies, mo'okuauhau hula, hula lineages, ewe hula, and familial lineages, ohana o ka hula. We are here to kuka, to talk story about hula memories and, of course, hula recollections. I have this fabulous book with me called Nana Ina Lo'ea Hula. And last night, I spoke with the man who authored this book. That was Mr. Wendell Silva. I want to share with you a picture, one that you might be familiar with. Who's this guy? That is me. I was very fortunate to be in this book, Nana Ina Lo'ea Hula. At this time, I would like to share with you a little note from Wendell Silva. When the book was presented to me many years ago, it says, to brother, keep up your wonderful work in perpetuating our beautiful Hawaiian culture and heritage. Me ke aloha pumehana, Wendell Silva. I'd also like to read the dedication of this beautiful book, this collection of Kumu Hula and their stories. Ua ho'ola'a mākou I keia puke I nā kūpuna a me nā mea lo'ea o ka hula o kākou o Hawaiʻi nei. We dedicate this book to the kūpuna and to our hula resource people. I want to share with you another picture. This is a beautiful picture of our Kumu Hula Maelia Ulalia Loebenstein. And in that picture is Kumu Hula Maelia Loebenstein Carter. And guess what? She is here today to share mana'o, her mana'o on hula. Our guest today is Maelia Loebenstein Carter. Maelia, let's talk story.
Aloha, tots.
Okay. I want to open up this conversation with Olelo No'eo, one that I think we're both familiar with. And it says, A ole pau ka ike I loko o ka halau ho'okahi. Literally, it says that knowledge is not contained, or the knowledge does not end in one school. Now, Kumu Hula, we're all familiar with this Olelo No'eo. what is your mana'o, your reflection, your interpretation of this olelo no'eau, a ole pau ka ike I loko o ka halau ho'okahi?
Well, it wouldn't be my interpretation. It would be the tradition in which it was shared with me from grandma. And it was that it didn't mean go do whatever you like. Yeah. Sometimes it's interpreted as, well, if it's not all the knowledge is in one school, then it means that's like the justification that I can just kind of hakuvale on the spot and make my own stuff up. And then eyala, you cannot tell me anything otherwise. It was more of, for me, I was taught to respect. Even though my grandmother was kupuna, she had a very open mind, an open heart when she looked at other traditions. And so for her, it was as long as there was a kahua, you had to respect it. And I think for me, that's what it continues today, is that I respect the knowledge that came from before. So in other words, when I look at another halau, another tradition, I try to look and appreciate where they're coming from. What is their mo'okuauhau? What is it that they're trying to perpetuate? How are they trying to do it? And to have a mutual respect for it, as long as there is a kahua for it. And that's how I interpret it, and I encourage my students to interpret, because we're not always right. How I teach things is how I was taught, but that may not necessarily be how you were taught. However, I do understand that there are basics and a foundation that we all share, and I think that's where the beauty of that olelo no'eau is that every moku is different, every ahupua'a is different, the mokupuni is different. So what your kino lau might be, if you're kahakai, that's different than if you're up mauka. And so in those differences, we still have similarities. And so we have to be really careful when we start to say, oh, that's not right, that's wrong. We have to go back and look at what is the tradition that they come from. So,
You know, Grandma was very inspirational.
yes.
She was a great part of my hula life, my hula learning. She was a fabulous mentor.
Yeah.
And Grandma was like my own grandma.
Yeah.
When you come to think of it, yeah, when she would come down to the halau
Mm-hmm.
and guide the process of me teaching and discipline, I learned so much about discipline when teaching through her.
Mm-hmm.
And she was always there as a great support.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. I will never forget that. And I'm going to have that memory for the rest of my
That's
life,
right.
being with her. And as a Kumu Hula myself, those are the treasures
Right.
of hula, having these fabulous relationships with people that you are attached to for the rest of your life.
Right.
Now, you're sitting here. You are the embodiment, the physical embodiment of Grandma.
Oh, thank you.
That's you, because you were raised with her. You were raised in hula with her. And then as life goes on, we become those people.
We do. We do. And, you know, talking about those days at He'eia, I remember all the Kumu Hula coming. And I think that's where that Olelo No'eau really thrived, because you had Auntie Ellen Castillo that used to come, and she was Auntie Bella Richards style. So there were so many different mo'okuauhau that were there to ka ko'o you as a young kumu, and now you do the same for all of us. And I just find that cycle, that continuation, that ho'oulu is just so important, that pilina, yeah? And that's something that we didn't create. That was something that our kupuna had the foresight to create and establish for us.
Well, you know, that tradition that I grew up in, I was raised in, what we call the ho'oke, or the ho'oloina, where you invite these Kumu Hula to come in and sit and guide you, criticize you, and also encourage you.
Yeah.
And this was the apono part, the recognition of who is, who was, who's connected in this tradition.
Yeah.
We did not need anything other than that. That came through the ho'oke and the ho'oloina process that people don't practice today.
Yeah.
So then, because you don't have the kupuna in the hula guiding your process, because you all that and a bag of poi, we lose the connection to the old tradition, which makes me think, well then, what tradition you from? Yeah. Which brings us to the next question in our interview. So reflect a little bit about your life in hula, your tradition, your kumu, your study.
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question. So, if I'm being really honest, if you go back and read Grandma's mo'olelo, so I was brought from Kaleponi, right? Because she wanted one Hawaiian grandchild. So at 2 years old, she brought me home unannounced. My grandfather had no say because my mother refused to be a part of hula. So as this mo'olelo goes, she chose to give me to Grandma. Because, as a young child, when you're brought up in the Western world, you question that. Why is my mommy giving me away? Why can't I live with my brothers and sisters? How come I have to live with Grandma and Grandpa? It wasn't until I got much older and, Grandma could sit down and explain the whole mo'olelo to me of why this was important. It's like, you are going to do, and, she basically threatened me into it, Melia. You're not walking away from this by hook or by crook. This is what you're going to do. You were born for this. You were given to me, and this is what you're going to do. So I didn't know anything. I thought everybody lived that way. I thought everybody lived with their kumu. And everybody got woke up in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, get up, get over here, because they had a vision and they needed to be, brought to life, and you need to remember this. I thought everybody did that. When I found out that I was so different than my friends, I was just like, I don't know that I like this, because we lived Hawaiian at home, and then we lived haole at school, and we had to live that that mindset, and it was so combative at times. And Grandma would always say, never mind what they say, you listen to me, what I'm telling you. When I'd have the opportunity, because she would drag me everywhere with her. So sitting with all of the Kumu Hula, all of these people in the book that she would sit and have coffee with. And she used to tell me, just shut your mouth, open your ears and your eyes, and remember everything that's going on. You are to be silent. And she's like, but you be a sponge.
Absolutely.
You be a sponge. And I've sat under tables at restaurants, I've sat in cars listening to conversations, and I marvel at how our kupuna had such respect for each other, how they hashed out any differences, how they shared ike. If they weren't kama'aina in a certain style, it was like, please, I'm going to send somebody to you, help this haumana with this and this and this and this. I marvel at that, and when you try to do that today, it's kind of frowned upon, because they're like, oh, what happened? How come? There's pilikia, she left that hello and she over here now, and so it's that beauty of growing up, living with your kumu. I never realized what a treasure it was, and that every day, it wasn't always what was said, it was what wasn't said that the lesson was in, and all these little things, so that when Grandma passed away and I sat, I had that moment to sit and in my young mind, I was thinking, oh, I can do this. I've taught all her classes. I've done, I do all the research. I type all the fact sheets. I do all the sewing. Come here. I got this. And then she was gone. And I'm like, she didn't teach me how to be a Kumu Hula. And then I started to doubt myself. And thank God I had people like you and my Aunty Leana and my Aunty Kahili that were still alive that I could turn to And you could rein me in like, Mae, what are you doing? You know, what are you thinking? And then it was when I was silent and stopped trying to think and have outside influences tell me how to be a Kumu Hula. I'm like, she was teaching me every day of my life. I know how to do this. All I have to do is turn off. And so like I can hear her say, Maelia, turn off your haole brain and listen to your kupuna. Just listen, just pray.
So the connections are so important.
So important.
That was really the proclamation of who you are and what hula lineage you belong to. You just said something important, that when Grandma passed away and you realized you were there by yourself, you really were not, because
I was not.
We were all here. And Aunty Leana, Aunty Kahili, and then Grandma had trained me in some of these processes, and then we were all there again to come back, reinvigorate this process with the next generation.
Yeah.
And isn't that the way it's done?
That's the only way I knew, and it just felt so natural because I wasn't by myself. It was like she was here because I had you in my ear going, Mae, what are you thinking? What are you doing? What is that? You know, and Auntie Leana going, oh, bebe, like, you know, maybe you should try it this way. But the same, encouraging, criticizing with love, you know, it's, if Grandma used to say, we know what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Suck it up, take it, and learn from it, right? Because through our mistakes, that's how we learn, right? And so to have that process and to still have that process, because now Auntie Lei and Auntie Kahili are gone. I still have you, and I have all of the kumu that were under, that Grandma would help tuck under her wing, are now, you folks are all that generation. And so even though I'm young in age, you know, I feel older in tradition because I was able to be around so many of those greats that influenced me, that I did learn, I did have that sponge effect, I did absorb everything. And now I'm trying to do that for the next generation. So it's a beautiful process.
So the connections remain to be the pono.
They do.
The affirmations.
They do.
Because as we stay connected, we are the support for one another in this tradition of hula.
Yeah, no, and you know, one of the lessons that Grandma, one of the key lessons, and there were so many, but she used to always tell me, Melia, you don't need to walk into a room and tell everybody, oh, I'm Kumu Hula there. She never addressed herself as Kumu Hula. When people would say, oh, this is Kumu Hula Maelia Loebenstein, she goes, no, I'm either Mrs. Loebenstein, I'm Aunty Mae, if I'm family, I'm sweetheart. She's like, but I'm not your Kumu. She's like, you don't need to do that. She's like, because the people who need to know who you are already do. You don't need to come in with that title. And so I still, you know, to this day, she's been gone almost 25 years. I've been a Kumu almost 25 years. I still don't feel worthy of that title because that was her title. And so I still feel like I'm growing into it. I always say I'm growing in, you know how people, the haole way is, oh, you know, you gotta wear their shoes. I'm like, well, I gotta wear her kihei. That's a big kihei to fit under. That mantle, that ike, I'm not even halfway there yet.
So, you know, you said that when Grandma passed away, you were not ready, and that it was hard for you to accept the title.
It was so hard.
So I have to tell you, I was not that much different when Auntie Emma, who was the primary source of my education in hula, passed away. I also had the same reflection. I did not want to be called Kumu Hula. I knew what my responsibilities were, but yet, because I had so much respect for my teacher, I had so much respect for the relationship that we had. I had so much respect and love for her presence and being there, for her nurturing and care. She was a Kumu Hula.
That's right.
And Who was I
Right.
to take this respected, honorable, esteemed title?
Yeah.
Wow, it was hard.
It is. It was hard.
Now, bearing that in mind, let's talk about your hula genealogy,
Okay.
your hula traditions, your hula legacy, and expound on that for us.
Okay. So I come from a familial hula line. So my grandmother was one of 15 children. Her mother, Aida Pakulani Kaianui Kaʻaihue Long, was a Kumu Hula who was raised in the traditional sense. So her great-granduncle was the master Kamavae. So she went to live with her Kumu and went through that uniki process. And I believe that she was about 13 or 14 at the time of her uniki when she was sent back with her family. So then she, began her family. She taught hula on Maui. And so my grandmother, all her sisters and brothers, like she would say, hula was like a chore. Hula was a part of their day. You went to school, you did your chores, you did your hula. So my grandmother, being one of the eldest children, had the privilege of being sent to Honolulu. So she was a boarder at St. Andrew's Priory. While she was there, she studied with Mama and Daddy Bray. She was a part of their troupe. Now, Auntie Lena Guerrero was a part of that troupe as well. That's where they met as young girls. And then later on, Auntie Lena kind of took over the troupe. Now, one of the interesting things about my hula genealogy, and I'll kind of flash back to it, is that when I was younger and I told Grandma, we were having, the conversation came up about uniki. I believe it was like in the 90s, and it was a OHA-sponsored Kumu Hula traveling panel. So there was like Auntie Joan Lindsay, Auntie Pat Bacon, Auntie Nana Kalama, Grandma, and they would go from island to island and hold these kuka sessions on hula. And so the question of uniki had come up. And I remember Grandma was, someone had posed the question, when are you gonna uniki Maelia? And her question was, she no need, she already has the ha. So at that age, I'm like, okay, but this person said, this genealogy has uniki, so how come? Like, I don't wanna, am I missing out on something? All of this kind of thing. So we went back to the room, and I was just like, how come you're not going to uniki me? And she's like, because Maelia, that's not for you. She's like, I'm going to tell you something. She's like, the only time my mama was mad at me, because apparently while she was in Honolulu with the Brays, because he was a kahuna too, right? So they had an uniki, and she told her mama about it, and my tutu would not speak to her because she had said, we had put all of that wasn't for her to do. She already was trained by Tutu Lady. She didn't need to go and do that. So when this question came up for me, she was like, I don't know if I want you to have that burden. She's like, but you already have the ha. And when that picture came out, I realized, because it's on our wall. It's been on our wall since Wendell gave it to us back when the book came out. And, when I would ask her about it, she's like, that's when you said yes. And I'm like, no, I didn't say yes. You said get in this damn picture. I had no choice. I was 12 years old. But she knew. She knew what she was doing. And so she's like, Maelia, you already have it. It's just waiting. She was like, I'm just waiting for you to stop being a donkey and say yes. Yeah? And so when I was about 21 and I had finished my rebellious phase, because my whole thing was, I know this is what I'm supposed to do, but will you at least let me say this is what I want to do? I don't want it to be, you're gonna do this. Right. And that's when I said, okay.
So, you bring up a very, very beautiful tradition especially with familial lines of hula, the imparting of the ha, the breath, which is a whole nother level. Because while people are clamoring about uniki and hu'elepo and proclamations, let's talk about the ha, the breath that is imparted, that can only be imparted within the home, within the family. You know, there is a tradition that says when the kupuna, or before the kupuna passes away, that the kupuna will give the last breath to a chosen mo'opuna. But what I would like to add to that is, the minute the kupuna starts to raise that mo'opuna, they are already imparting this ha, this breath, this ha loa from the ancient time that reflects, of course, the tradition that you are born into.
That I was born into. And oddly, you know, as I became older and, you know, grandma's lessons, because my name is Kahanuola. And she's like, and you will be Kahanuola. And it was just, now I can look at it and say, my gosh, like our kupuna are so amazing, yeah, that they foresee everything, they hear everything, they accept everything. They're just waiting for you to stop being stubborn, yeah? But that ha, you're right. It's when she decided to pick me up, and like in her interview, she said she wanted one Hawaiian mo'opuna. And from the minute I got home, everything that she did was to groom me for this place.
Can you imagine, with every breath when she spoke to you, whether it was coddling you or reprimanding you?
It was more that one.
Every breath as she sang or chanted,
Yeah.
every moment when she woke up in the morning, when made your dinner, your mea'ai,
Everything.
everything, breath was
Everything.
imparted. The ha of the hula
was there. Everything that she did was to groom me for this. And it wasn't for her. That was the thing. It wasn't that it was for her. It was to realize it was for everyone that came before her. That she was fulfilling her kuleana to her mama and to my kupuna nui and to every ulalia that came before that, you know? And that when I can look and say, I am the 6th generation, you know, of teaching hula within our family. And it wasn't that she was just doing it, well, because she had nothing else to do and she wanted to make a name for herself. It was she was fulfilling what she had promised her mama.
So this is really uniquely different in that you're not having a class, and it's not ao, a lesson.
No.
It is more ao, an enlightenment through ho'opili, living with and mimicking grandma.
Everything, because that's the whole thing. You know, nowadays it's like, what is your hobby? Hula. I'm like, that's not a hobby. And so even under occupation, it's like, I don't write Kumu Hula. That's not an occupation. That's not a job. It's a life. It's my life. It's who I am. It's my essence. And when I hear students say, I go to hula, it's like, I never went to hula. I was hula. I lived hula. Every minute was hula. If it wasn't singing, if it wasn't chanting, if it wasn't making lei, if it wasn't, it was the whole process. It was going and tending in the yard. It was learning how to do all of these things. It was learning the spiritual balance. I think if, you know, grandma used to say, I can teach anybody how to dance.
Yep.
She's like, the physical part, I can teach anything. She's like, but the spiritual part is different. It's when you're ready. And her thing wasn't, I come to her and it's like, oh, grandma, can I learn this song? Can you teach me this song? Oh my gosh, I can just see, pachak. I never, ever asked my kumu to learn something.
So then, hula is not just a tradition, it is a way of life.
It's a way of life.
Also, there are different levels.
There are.
There is a spiritual level, there is a mental level, and there is a physical level. So many people come to class because they want to learn the steps, the motions, the physical hula.
Yes.
But without the other components, the mental part and the spiritual part of the hula, you're missing something.
You're missing something. It's just a dance, you know, and Grandma used to always say, you know, Maelia, sometimes the lesson is not for today. She's like, you're not ready. She's like, I'll let you know when you're ready. She's like, just ho'omanawa nui, be patient. She's like, it will come. And if it doesn't come, it means you weren't meant to learn it. Not now.
Now you said another thing, manawa nui.
Manawa nui.
So manawa nui, of course, ho'omanawa nui, being to have patience. Manawa nui, this huge time. What you said is very important in the hula tradition, because if today is not the right time, today is not the right time. Yeah. And students today may say, well, when is the right time?
Right.
And the answer would be, when I am ready.
When I'm ready. That's why it's so hard too. You know, like now we do workshops, right? And they want to know months in advance what you're going to teach. And I'm like, what if I change my mind? What if I walk into the room, I just look at them and I'm like, that's not for you today. I already know. And I got to change everything on the spot, right? And they all get so, right? Because that's the Western mind. They have to know ahead of time. Hawaiian way was, you just better be makaukau. Whatever your kumu is going to give you, right? Just be makaukau. Mind, body, and spirit. You better be present.
And they'll know when you're ready.
They will know.
It is not for you to decide when you are ready.
No.
Because that would be very disrespectful.
Very.
If you put faith, trust, dedication into your Kumu Hula, then you put that kuleana or responsibility in them.
Yeah.
Because they have good training, years of experience, dedication, know-how, and commitment.
And I always looked at it as my kumu knew best. Don't question. She used to tell me that all the time, Maelia, don't question me, right? Because that's the haole school side, right? You know, when you go Catholic school, I said, this is what happens when you send me to private school all these years. I'm taught to question. But when you come home, don't question. Just listen. Just do. Shut your mouth. Watch and she would never explain. I never learned, okay, you take this and you braid this here and you take this flower and no. It was you sit, you close your mouth, open your eyes, and do what I do. That was the training. And I let you know when it's right.
So pa'akawaha hana mekalima. Because that's the old way of learning. And I think it is still good for today. Because it wasn't that you shut your mouth and work with your hands. It was, if you're talking too much, you're not going to hear the silence of the lesson. You're going to miss the lesson.
You're missing the lesson.
So what you need to do is pay attention, focus, and absorb everything you can, as you mentioned earlier, like a sponge. And in the process of the ho'opili, not the ho'a'o, the ho'opili, you gain all of this.
You gain all of it. Yeah. And sometimes the lessons were in the silence. That's what and it's like now as I've gotten older, I'm just like, oh, Grandma, that was such an amazing, and it wasn't, that's why I say it wasn't what she said all the time. It's what she didn't say. Right. When she would just give you that look, kind of like how you do when people are doing things. Yeah. The look. We all know that look. And it's like, oh, there's so much being said in that one look.
So do you do this when somebody says, can you explain this motion?
Yes.
And that's it.
Yeah. Or it's like I'm showing and then they'll tell me, oh, Kumu, what was your hand here or was it here? And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, and it's hard. And I will say that it is hard. I often wonder how Grandma would function in this day and age with this tech, because she didn't even like cordless telephones. How she would function with today's kind of haumana. I would almost be afraid for them, because this generation is so used to fast drive-through, quick, no hard work. It's just all right here. Everything, it's like, oh, if I want to know, I just go on Google. At least us, we were the encyclopedia generation. You had to go to a library and find out information, or you had to wait. We didn't have all of this pepa and explanation. And from your kumu, it was what your kumu wanted you to learn, you learned. And it was your job to malamai it.
What are you doing today in halau? Do you have halau? Are you practicing? Are you studying? What's going on?
I'm doing everything, all of the above. So I still have halau. I'm still continuing. Definitely, I've gone hybrid. So with this pandemic, I'm teaching half online for those who feel safer at home, and in person. And oddly enough, it's the makua, the older generation, that comes to class. The young ones are all at home on the computer. I am still doing that. I am hoping that by next year we can gather. And so I've kind of taken that approach that, okay, I cannot teach you any more dances right now. I said, because I'm over Zoom hula. It's going to take me 3 years to undo all your bad habits. But what we can do is be makau. So we've gone hiking, we've gone to gather our kala'au, we have huaka'i to go and gather our ili. It's like, let's make our pa'u, let's do all of the other things that we can still learn and be together, still have pilina, still learn and grow, but not necessarily in dances. Because the physical part is that we can teach. You can learn plenty songs and really not learn anything. Yeah. So still doing that, still going in a holomua fashion, and trying to find creative ways to keep us all together. So we've done a lot of things like watching old videos. I've dug up all the old videos, transferred them, and class today is, you're not going to listen to me. You're going to listen to the source. So then when you wonder, why does Kumu do this? Why does Kumu say that? Well, here, listen, because I am a product of my Kumu, who's a product of her Kumu, because she's going to tell you she learned that from her mother. She learned that from her grandmother. Yep. So you listen to her, and you want to know how to be a Waʻahila, you listen to your Kumu. So that's what we've been doing. It's like, because otherwise they get so disconnected and they get so confused because they see all of these things on social media or whatever it is, and they get confused. So I tell them, shh, just listen to the source. Yeah? Come back to the source.
So earlier you talked about spiritualism. Spiritualism in hula. We also mentioned the mental aspect and the physical. So spirit, mind, and body. Let's talk a little bit about the spiritual part.
Okay.
I'm sure Grandma had a lot to share back then.
She did.
I'm sure she shared protocol, ceremony, procedure, because, in the pono of our kupuna, when it comes to spirituality, there is a proper way to do things.
Yes.
Expound a little bit.
So for Grandma, being devout Catholic, our house was a devout Catholic home. It was very interesting to be a part of that process because my grandfather was very rigid in that sense. And Grandma had, on Sundays, she was the altar society, she was the cantor at church, I was the organ player, all of this. But then we went home and the doors closed, and then it was a different, right? It was a different lesson. And a lot of times, she would do it when my grandfather wasn't around because he'd be like, oh, you're doing that Don Hibby-Jibby stuff again. And so what I appreciate the most about her was her ability to balance.
Yep.
That, yes, we're dancing for laka. Yes, and the best way I can sum it up in how she explained it to me is that akua is in everything we do. just like in Catholicism, in everything you do, you're praying. Who are you praying to? She's like, Akua is always first. She's like, and you just have to realize that Akua gave you everything. Akua gave you all the aina, the everything. She goes, just look at it as that. Akua created everything. So you mahalo him first. And she's like, and then come all of our kupuna. And she's like, and our kupuna made it possible for all of the work of Akua to become manifested. And so in, dancing to laka, in dancing to pele, she's like, that's our tutu. That's our kupuna. She's like, because in everything, if Akua created it, she's like, you mahalo Akua. She goes, it's the same thing. And she's like, now, when it came, like we talked about uniki, what I always knew from grandma was, this is not for you. She's like, you are not to kneel. She's like, because you know better. She's like, now we've chosen, ke Akua. She's like, so you won't kneel in front of another altar. She's like, because you're going to have to be able to explain that. She's like, but if you live your life pono, she's like, you recognize the order, you recognize who comes, what comes from who, you mahalo that, you honor that protocol, and know your place. That was one of her big lessons. She goes, when you know your place, everything will fall into order. Yeah?
Now, the mind. The mental part of hula. When I think of that, the first thing that comes to my thought is discipline.
Oh, yes.
Reflect a little bit about that.
Well, when you're raised by a kumu, you don't know anything but discipline. Plus, it was a kupuna. So we had a very disciplined and not the kind of, now the connotation of discipline is, abuse. I wouldn't consider it abuse.
You mean the pu'ili?
The pu'ili. I knew the pu'ili well. I was
Were you good friends with the pu'ili?
I was such a good friend. I mean, we were pili. And because I had that Western mindset, right? So you want to question everything, right? So it's just like, Melia, do it again. So there was the discipline in the physical part, yeah? There was a discipline in the mental part, in the learning. And then there was the discipline of your spirit. My spirit didn't quite catch up with the mental and the physical until I got older. Because as a child, you don't know what it is to be spiritually disciplined. Yeah. So the first kind of discipline I learned was physical. How to control my body, how to control my actions. Then it became the discipline of how to control my words. Yeah, my eyes. I didn't realize that my eyes, like my grandma used to say, it's not what you're saying, it's what you're not saying. Yeah, the sassy. She's like, your eyes are sassy right now. She's knock it off. They were with the pu'ili again. But the discipline in learning time and place for everything, yeah, that there was a time and a place. And once you could learn to, you're first disciplining your body. How are we dancing? What are we doing with it? Then it was, how are we controlling our mind? What are we doing? What are you doing to makaukau yourself? What are you doing to honor the things that were given to you? Then there was that discipline. And when you could get that control, then, your physical hula started to change a little bit. Then it was, as you began to gain spiritual ike, or insight, it took your hula to a whole nother level. And I appreciated that about grandma. She, because her thing was that you're going to learn a song when you're 5 years old. You're going to be dancing that for the rest of your life. She's like, but when you're 5 and when you're 12, I should see a difference. When you're 12 and you're 20, I should see a difference. And so on and so forth. So when I see Kaiko Mahine dancing the same song as Kupuna Hine, and they're doing all of this, and all, I'm like, what are you doing? Because that's not your life experience.
Absolutely true.
That is not what you know.
Absolutely true.
Right? It's the expression comes from within. That's a part of the discipline. It comes from that ike.
I think the kupuana, or the growth process,
the growth.
You should reflect the growth at what level you're in and not be a keiki reflecting an adult.
Right, and vice
presentation.
versa.
Right,
and
right,
vice versa.
right.
That's part of the discipline of hula. And that was something that,
That's the physical part.
that is the physical part. But
And they're all connected.
And they're all connected. They're all connected. And so, you know, as kumu, that's part of our job, right? To help each segment, each piece of them, ho'olu, yeah? We plant the seed, and it's for us to help them grow through life, to watch them, whether they're kaikamahine, keikikane, whatever it is, to see them grow and to achieve that discipline in all three facets.
So you have the ho'oma kaukau ana o ka uhane amena kuleana. So the preparedness of the spirit, the understanding, and the responsibilities that come with that. The ho'oma kaukau ana no o ka no'ono'o amena kuleana. So you have the preparedness of the mind and those responsibilities, and you have the ho'oma kaukau ana no o ke kino ame na kuleana, the responsibilities that come with preparedness of the body, because all of that is so important to the hula. And if people see hula as just one thing, then they're missing the entire tradition.
Yes. There's more to it. And I do remember Grandma always saying that she was like, our hula is not for everybody. Yeah. We weren't one, and we're still not, a halau that goes out and solicits and tries to get new students. We still kind of have it the old way. It's like, I think you might fit here. Let me see. And if I cannot help you, I can send you to somebody, you know, where I still send people like, I don't think this is the right home for you. So we keep it very small because it is still something that it's not, I hear her saying it's not for everybody. The lesson is not for everybody. Not everybody's ready for this.
So this word kukahi, unique, standing as one. Yeah. Back then, when you saw people performing the hula, because of their kukahi, you would be able to tell what school they came from and who their teacher was.
Yes.
What is your kukahi? What is your uniqueness?
I think it's more in our kulana, and there's definitely the kahua of our steps is a little different because that's something that came from Mama and Daddy Bray. Our style has a little bit of our familial hula as far as what our tutu used to do from Maui. But a lot of our influence comes from physically from the Brays. A lot of our training practices, our hakikino, come from the Brays. And that was something that Grandma really, because she spent so much of her life with it, she really appreciated those lessons from them. And then, of course, later in life, she was influenced and mentored by Uncle Henry Pa. And so you can see a lot of that in a lot of our choreography. And so when we dance, you should be able, if you know hula, you should be able to know where it comes from. You should be able to see it.
What are a few of those unique things?
So we have, now I hear everybody doing, oh, it's a step brush uehe. When Grandma taught it to us, it was a pavehe. And it was just, I'm like, well, that doesn't, like a mat. And she's like, it's kind of like the sweeping of the foot on that fine mat. That was the reference. When we have, in some traditions, it's called the Ka Hula. We call it the pahe'e, right? And how she would break it down. Just the our pahu step that would come from Uncle Henry. Just those little idiosyncrasies and how they're put together. And the leva in the kikala, the ha'aleva of the kikala, and the smoothness and the fluidity was something that was really important to Grandma, because she's like, life is circular, yeah? No more all these angles. No more 1, 2, 3, stop, 1, 2, 3, stop. She's like, the wind doesn't go 1, 2, 3, stop, 1, 2, 3, stop. She's like, life is circular. The pono is circular. Everything continues. And so our hula, the way our body moves and is trained, is to mimic that, is to not, there's no stopping, yeah? And so I think once we get our dancers' bodies disciplined in that, then we go on to their kulana, yeah, then the hie of the hula, how they hold themselves, what are all the components that help to make the, I'll use a style, our kukahi. So there's a lot of components to it. But I think if I had to pick the one about grandma, it was her kulana. Yeah, that was the one thing. It was how you sat, how you held yourself. It wasn't just about the hula. It was about the total being, right?
So, which is really important because it never ends, right?
It never
you
ends.
You are that Kumu Hula. You are that beacon of light. You are that role model of integrity wherever you go.
Totally.
24/7. It never ends.
It never ends. And that's the whole thing. She's like, this is not something that you go flip on the switch and then turn it off. She's like, there's no turning on and off. She's like, the kihei stays on. That's why when, people are like, well, what kihei did you get at your uniki? And I'm like, I wear my grandma's kihei. I'm like, the kihei never comes off. As a Kumu Hula, it never comes off.
Absolutely. That's one of the things I remember about grandma is that Kumu Hula was about respect. Mm-hmm. Kumu Hula, for those people, was the kulana hie.
Yeah.
This mannerism that they carried themselves around with wherever they went.
Right.
Do you see that today? Can we be honest? Reflect in a very respectful way, my dear.
It's different. It is different. I think we have become very westernized. Our role models have
So did we go from the ha-loa to the ha-ole?
Yes, we did. I feel so. I feel like sometimes it's very easy to get lost. And for me, that lesson grandma said, you don't have to announce yourself. You don't have to tell people. The people who need to know, they're going to find you. They're going to know. Right. So there's no need to, probably our generation is the last generation that don't need to be identified.
We are who we are.
We are who we are. Like grandma, I used to marvel when they would walk into rooms, it was like the rooms would go hushed. Right. Yeah, there was like this silence of respect. And she used to say, it's not how much noise they make, not how much applause you get, how much hooting and hollering. If you hooted and hollered when our halal was on, holy smokes, you were going to get it because that was not a sign of respect. That's a very Western concept.
Our grandma always said, appreciate, but never over-celebrate.
No, never. Never. You never did. It was in the silence that respect that was given. So they didn't come into the room all and loud and all of this kind of stuff.
And we try to pattern ourselves after them.
We do. I can still hear her. Don't you run down to the supermarket looking any old way. You have this isn't something that you can turn on or off.
Because before I jump on any table at a bar and start dancing.
You jump on tables.
Oh, hell no. Let me remind you, I always think about this kulana hie of the teachers that walked before me. And I'm sorry, I didn't see them doing that. So I am not going to do that either. Because as a Kumu Hula, I want to respect all of them. And they are always with me. Totally. And in spirituality, as long as we connected to the hula, we connected to the goddess Laka.
Exactly.
Why then would be hemo ia the lole, jump on the table, and think that's okay.
I know.
But before we go further, I want to explain something. So when I say ha-loa, I'm speaking about the connection to the tradition. When I speak of the ha-ole, not having the ha, as we talked about, being passed on from generation to generation within those traditions.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I'm going to be somewhere doing things that my teacher didn't do.
I'm
Then I
still
would not
very
be
afraid. You know,
perpetuating.
I always joke, it's just like, you know, I don't want to get to the pearly gates and grandma's standing there with golden pu'ili ready to whack me because I did something wrong. That is, to me, the fear of disappointing my kupuna
Yeah.
is my biggest fear in life.
Yeah.
If it's not anything here and manifested physically, it's the fact that if I disappoint them by not doing what I know is right, that's where I worry.
Well, that's what Aumakua worship is all about. And we're honoring our kupuna with everything that we do. You see, as long as we respect and give them honor, we are within that pono, which is what you just said.
Yeah.
Because what we don't want to happen is we get to the Ao, the enlightenment, and the Lena when we transcend, and we got to face them and say,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Last thing, last point.
Okay.
We're going to have you do a hula.
Okay.
And you're going to do Ke Aloha.
Okay.
Anything about that mele that you'd like to share?
This was a very interesting mele because Grandma actually, when Aunty Leigh Collins wrote this mele, the original recording was Grandma, Auntie Sally Wood, and Aunty Leigh Collins. I still have the old disc that they were a trio together.
That's a remarkable story.
It is. And the thing about this story was when my grandma first found out that I had a boyfriend, whom I'm now married to, then she's like, all right, I can teach this to you. Let's see what you can do with it. So when I first learned this song, so many years ago, and then I thought, oh no, if I do it too well and show that I understand it too well, then I'm going to get lickings for this. So it was kind of one of those, it was a test.
I understand.
It was a test. She wanted to see how much Ike I actually had. But of course now...
And she could see it in the performance
Oh,
of that
she
hula.
could so see it. I'm thinking to myself, don't ummy good, don't do this too, don't make too much, don't show too much.
Are we a punua I ka punana manu, or have we...
Either way, I was doomed. If I didn't do it good, I was going to get it. If I did it too good, I was going to get it. So I always giggle over this song. So it definitely is a favorite because it was the first, and as Grandma said, it was one of the first times that she recognized me as a wahine.
Isn't it remarkable that these Kumu Hula could detect so many things with their eye, Ike, by watching their students dance?
Yeah, because the first time she said that I could learn a mele ma'i, I was like, I can? She goes, well, you have Ike, don't you? And I'm like, I don't know how to answer this. I'm going to get it.
Best not to say anything, just smile.
Best not to say anything. I'm like, yeah. So, but that's what I marvel. And I can't wait to get to that time. Remember, we always said, I can't wait so that we could just say what we want. Be like the kupuna. Just say what you want. Tell it like it is. I have plenty of time. I don't want to be there too. Grandma used to say, don't rush.
Right.
She goes, don't rush to be old. You're going to be old the rest of your life. Be young. Right?
And we had a time where everybody
wants to be a kupuna. I don't want to be a kupuna because then that means I'm there. Right
that
under
means the next level is Aumakua now.
I like wait. I don't like rush. No, I like this now.
Stay at your proper level.
Yeah, I can
Stay
wait
at
my
your
turn.
Manavanui.
I can wait my turn.
There we go.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for being a part of Ke Ao Mālamalama o Ka Hula. Once again, this is our Kumu Hula Maelia Loebenstein Carter, and we are here because we want to share the enlightenment of the hula and hula traditions. Again, I want to mahalo our college here at Windward Community College, all of our administrators and our staff for allowing this program to happen, to be a reality, an educational program where we share the stories, the hula stories, and the Kumu Hula of Hawaiʻi. Mahalo to the Palikū Theatre and all of the staff and everyone who had a hand in making this a fabulous presentation. There are so many people that made contributions to making this program a success. We want to say to every one of you, mahalo anui loa.
Mahalo. Mahalo tuts.
Ka holo. Maku upoli. Maku upoli mai oe. E ku uipo. Aloha. Ke ala o nauna. Kou. No ke ano ahi ahi. Mamulia o koleo. Mamulia o koleo. Ua malune ia kino. E kino palu palu kou. Kahana a ke aloha. Uala ino ho'i au. Uala ino ho'i au. Kahanua ka ipo. E ho o ipo nei. Nā ne apu ka ua. Iha! Haina mai ka puana. Haina mai ka puana. E ku uipo aloha. He ala o nauna kou. No ke ano ahi ahi. Haina hou. Haina mai ka puana. E ku uipo aloha. He ala o nauna kou. No ke ano ahi ahi.